Hey guys, so I'm from the Salesforce Trailers team and welcome to our next session. And today's session, we're gonna be taking a look at application events in our components and then creating an example or an implementation of the application events. So in our last class or session, we talked about component events and we did an implementation of our component events. So let me go back to the component events for a little bit. We talked about how component events only travel upwards the hierarchy. So the problem that we encountered in our component events was that they didn't travel from the child to further child. So only travel from the child to the parent component. So our application events help us overcome that limitation, and we can actually send event data from a parent to every component irrespective of whether it's a parent or a child component. So let me come to our website and the application events section. So application events work more like a broadcast and receive model. Any component can fire an application event and all the other components in the markup will receive it. But this is something really important regarding application events. So it works like a radio broadcast. So let's say if I go back to this diagram for relativity, you can fire an application event from component A, B, C, doesn't matter. All the other components present in your application will receive it. And then you can add a handler to receive it, just like we did in our component events, and do whatever process you want to do. It does not matter if these are parent to child or child to parent, right? So this is how basically application events work. But now a question arises, since application events send data to every other component irrespective of whether it's a parent or a child, why don't we always use application events instead of the component events? So component events are better performance wise than application events. So if you need to send information, the first thing or the first choice should always be your component events. And only if you have a scenario where component events will not suffice, then you need to move to the application events. But more about this later. This is like there is to it regarding application events. They're a lot more simpler. You don't have to consider any hierarchy. You can fire them from anywhere and they'll be saved on all the components. So let's see them in action. So this is our example that we developed in our last session, right? We're going to use the same example, but just for the purposes of properly implementing application events, I'm going to create one more component called grandchild. And then I had this parent. On the parent, I had this child. So on the child, I'm going to use the grandchild. So now we have like a three-way hierarchy. Like we have parent, then we have child, and then we have grandchild. Now we're going to keep it the same. We're going to still fire my event from this mid-level component, that is the child. But instead of firing a component event, we're going to be firing an application event this time. So first, let's go ahead and create not a lightning application, but a lightning event. So I'm going to fire, new, and lightning event. And I'm going to name it as my custom application event. I'm going to submit it. So again, this time we are going to use the default type, which is the application. And again, I'm going to define an attribute inside it. This time we can name it as event text, just for simplicity's sake, we're gonna keep this as a string again, and that's it. And then in the description, I'm gonna say my first application event. Now, taking into consideration the steps we followed for the component events, what we did was we had to register the event from where we wanted to fire it. So we registered our component event in the child. So we are going to do the same thing in the case of our application events as well. You still have to register the event from where you want to fire it from. So the order register event tag can also be used with application events. So in the child, I just need to do one thing. I need to change the type of my event here as my custom application event. Also, the second thing which is not that well documented is when you register a application event, do not specify a name for it. It is not required. I'll tell you why it is not required. And if the problem is, if you specify this name here, your application event is not going to work properly. So just remove it from now. Just register it with only the type. Oh, I think we got an error when we displayed it without a name. So let me just do that. Oh, I see. So my apologies on that. I mean, when you register your application event, you still need to specify the name. I think you don't need to specify the name in the handler, but we'll take a look at that real quick. Let's change the name here to app event because it's an application event and not a component event. All right. So now since we have registered this event, let's change the code in our fire event method just to change the syntax there so that we fire the application event instead. So let me go to this fire event method. So see, the only difference between firing a component and application event is we change the syntax of how we get that into a variable. So for application events, you don't need to use this component variable. And the way we do it is we do it by $a dot get, and then in the component events we use the name right here. We don't need to use this name. In the case of application events, we'll do something like e dot c colon and then my event name, which is my custom application event. So this $a is used here because in the case of component events, they work off these unique names in your register and your handler, but they don't in the case of your application events because application events work like a broadcast mode. So you just get it by using this $a. And this $a is like a utility or a framework variable. This is used for many functions. And one of its uses is fetching your application events. Then the rest of this stuff is same. You can still set attribute using set params. You'll need to make a change here since the attribute name for our application event is different. And instead of the event info, it is event text, right? So now this is done. This will fire an application event now instead of our component event. So now we need to make changes in our parent where we were handling this. So yeah, this is what I was talking about earlier. When handling an application event, don't specify a name because it will not work. I'll show you guys how that looks, but let's do the changes here first. So while handling application events, you just specify the event type and the action to call. So right now it's handling the custom component event. Instead, let's change this to my application event. So this handler will now just receive the application event instead of the component event. Now, if I go to my JavaScript, the thing is, we don't need to change anything specifically in my JavaScript. Everything works the same way that it did for your component events. You can still get your attribute values using event.getParam. The only thing again we'll need to change is that we change our attribute name. So let me go here and put it as event text. Now it should work fine. But now to demonstrate that an application event is also sent to all the childs as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to handle my application event on my grandchild as well. So for ease, I'm just going to copy it here. We define that same handler on our grandchild as well, just the same way we did it on the parent, right? And then we're also going to define this event receive method in my grandchild like this. And then we're going to have the same thing in my grandchild, but just to demonstrate you guys that both the errors that show up are different, I'm going to add a grandchild and like this. And inside of my parent, I'm going to alert the value being received here as parent like this. So let us go to our application and preview this. So now when I click on this fire event from child, so you see first it is received on my grandchild. We get that alert from the grandchild, and then we get the alert from the parent. So you can see in the case of application events, our event travels to our grandchild as well as our parent. So now to demonstrate, if I specify a name here, let's say I do a name, and I'm going to keep it as the same name that I have put it on my child where we're firing the event from. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and refresh my application. Now when I click this button, the grandchild still receives it, but you'll see the parent stop receiving the event because this name was specified in the parent markup. So again, don't use a name in your handler when you are implementing application events. So I hope you guys understood how application events work. We easily demonstrated that they are sent to every component, be on the application, be it a parent or a child or whatever. So in our case, when we fired it from the child, the mid-level component, the application event got received on our parent as well as our grandchild. And so one question that might be bugging you guys is, we received it first on the grandchild and then on the parent. So Salesforce documentation says that this order is not received, but as per our testing, it seems to be fixed so that it goes from the lowermost, that is the grandchild, to the topmost. Like in the case of application events, even if I fire any event from maybe A, B, D, doesn't matter, he'll go to the D first, then to B, and then to A. But we could not be sure, this could change in the future. So don't take it as something concrete unless it's mentioned in the documentation, which is it is not. So that's the last pointer in our application events. So that's gonna be it for this session, guys. I hope you are able to easily understand and implement the application events in your code as well. So in our next session, we are gonna be talking about event propagation and a little bit about some standard common events that we use in our Aura framework, right? So I hope to see you guys in our next session and keep learning.